being completely unreasonable, working way too hard, pushing yourself too hard and expecting everybody else to do the same. All of these things are requirements at the early stage, but at some point they just become an encumbrance. I'm Ben Whately. I'm co-founder and CPO at Memrise, which is a program for learning languages.
And how did you come up with this concept? How did you feel there was a need for this?
Right, so I mean, it came out of my own interest. So Ed, my co-founder, and I both studied cognitive science at university, and we're just very interested in the way memory works, the way people learn. After leaving Oxford, Ed actually went to become a competitive memorizer and became a grandmaster of memory and wasted his 20s in the World Memory Championships. I went to China to see if I could teach myself Chinese, and it kind of came out of sort of plaintive personal need that I had always been really bad at languages at school. I'd really struggled with them. It was the one subject I just couldn't manage. And then from studying how the human mind works, I mean, it becomes obvious that speaking another language or learning languages is almost the defining human characteristic. And it's quite disappointing to discover that the defining characteristic of the species is something that you're crap at. And so I thought, well, maybe there's some way around this. So I wanted to go and see if I was unencumbered by people trying to teach me the language, whether I'd be able to learn it. And so that kind of need and that experience of learning Chinese through a kind of immersion approach really laid the bedrock for then Ed and I came back together after a few years after leaving university to found the company and kind of take the learnings that we had from cognitive science, from memory techniques, from immersive language learning, and bring those together into a product that can bring that experience online.
And how did you go about creating an MVP? And at what point did you realize, actually, you know what, we've got something here and we can make a real business of this?
Yeah, so actually, MVP is so difficult today when it's viable, and everyone comes across this problem. So what we did was we launched with, we thought, okay, we've got these grand ideas of creating ways to learn languages primarily, but also really learn anything, like an approach to learning that is centered on the learner's interest rather than on the creation of syllabuses that you then force the learner to go through. And it is this idea of, the core of memory techniques is that you use your imagination to make information relevant to what you already know. Like that's the basis of all mnemonics. And just expanding that idea out to all forms of learning. So we started with a product. Let's just bring mnemonics, which people don't use nearly enough. They think there's something that's kind of out there, and memory weirdos like Ed, who memorizes 10,000 digit binary numbers, use. They can help us. So we created that platform on the web, allowed people to create their own courses or own lists of facts to learn, and then gave them help in creating mnemonics. And that grew kind of steadily through the UK school system for sort of 3-4 years but what it didn't do, and what we found once we got that MVP out there and started building a community around it, was that actually the product that we needed in order to create these really immersive situations that was at the heart of how we actually want to teach languages needed quite a different product set. So then we shifted course. We created all the content ourselves. We built it on mobile rather than web. And we focused heavily on video. And we did that was kind of 2015. And I guess at that point, we already had a big competitor in Duolingo who'd got nearly 100 million users at that point. And our hypothesis was that they still aren't actually teaching languages effectively. Like no one actually learns to speak a language from Duolingo. And the reason for that is you learn a syllabus, but you don't learn the non-negotiable in learning a language is actually practicing, trying to understand someone and making yourself understood. That bit is missing. So we think this market is still there to win. From launch, we actually grew at exactly the same rate as Duolingo had from their launch. If you put the graphs on top of each other, and we got up to kind of million installs a month, that kind of level. And we actually won the Google Play Best App in 2017, first education app to win it, first European app to win it. It's kind of suggesting that hypothesis was correct. But sorry, back to your question about the kind of MVP. In a sense, we've done a series of MVPs. We did this MVP product where we're like, this is the first thing we can get to market to bring memory techniques to people. Didn't get the growth that we were really looking for. It was growing kind of slowly. We got 1 million, 2 million users over 3-4 years, but we knew that wasn't the growth that we needed. So then we had to make a shift, change a bunch of things, got some really rapid growth. Then a lot of the competitors started copying some of the things we were doing. That gap reduced between the product we'd launched and the competitors, so that growth slowed. And now we're in the process of actually doing that again and making another set of shifts and saying, now we've got to take another step closer to those immersive experiences. So that's been my kind of experience, is that it's not sort of MVP then scale. It has been MVP, scale it a bit, realize that I might be not quite the right track, retrace a bit, launch something slightly different, go further with that one, and kind of roll through that sequence.
Absolutely. And you mentioned a couple of things there, just as you've grown, and I guess some of the metrics behind that. So one of them is user base and steadily growing that, but also trying to really ramp that up. And always a good thing, I suppose, if your competitors are trying to copy certain aspects, quite a flattering, but at times annoying thing. The other thing you mentioned was the awards. So I see you've entered and been fairly successful in a number of awards over the past few years. So how important is that for the business and for gaining traction, whether it be with investors or new users?
Well, it's so the award that had a big impact really was the Google Play one, but that it's also slightly self-referential in that Google in particular give the way that their featuring worked at that time, and I think broadly as it works now, is that they give you a mini featuring, they look at the data, they see how well people convert to it, they see the retention of people who came through that featuring, i.e. how much that featuring delivered value to them. If it did well, they give you a bigger one. And if that does well, they give you a bigger one. And they gradually go up until if you do well at all levels and they can put a fire hose at you, then they put a fire hose at you. And so it had a great impact, but it's not like an overnight success story. You can't just turn it on. And indeed, they aren't kind of kingmakers. They will only back a horse once they see that it's winning anyway. It's the kind of way that it works. So if they see that you're going out in front of the pack, they'll supercharge it because they just want to serve the Google Play users as well as possible. So that bit, yeah. So
yeah,
answer the question.
And talk to me a bit about how your roles changed throughout all of this. So we're talking from when you first started the business up to millions of users. I believe you've got a team of over 100 people now working at the business. So how's your role changed throughout?
Yeah, so been through huge cycles, and I guess let me just think for a moment. I guess initially you do everything. So and Ed and I were right on product, we were on marketing, we were on everything except tech. And on tech, we were heavy into writing the specs and definitely understanding the systems that were put there, like really in the detail. As you scale, inevitably you've got to change that. And it is, I mean, one of the things I found hardest is kind of the personality traits that are successful, cause the company to be successful at a small scale, which is being into every different detail, being completely unreasonable, working way too hard, pushing yourself too hard and expecting everybody else to do the same. Don't give up even when it's completely obvious that you failed. Like all of these things are requirements at the early stage, but at some point they just become an encumbrance. And spotting that and adapting to that has been a really big challenge. And everyone said it to begin with, and we knew that was so, but I still had to learn that lesson, still have to learn that lesson every day for myself, because those are my personality traits. It's hard to change those things. And I found myself that, and actually Ed has done the same, that either we step back too far and we're like, okay, we'll let these squads take it and see where they go with it. And then they run off in a direction. You're like, no, that was totally wrong. Come back here, stop that. Which totally demotivating for those people. Or we're much too close to them and saying, wait, no, hold on, do it that way. Wait, what are you thinking there? And neither of those extremes is the right thing, and you need to find that kind of middle ground. And the way that we've done that, and the way that I'm finding that really effective at the moment, is to put my energies into being really clear about the high level direction and which parts of that I really care about. And this is a really big discipline. And it is, for me, separating out things that are at the beginning level, like the pedagogy of how we create learning experiences and the detail of the UI and how that ties into a business model and a point system. All of those things were just tied together in my mind. They were one thing. But right now, and as the company grows, what's important is that what I'm uniquely bringing into the company is an understanding of how people learn and the pedagogy. How you create a point system and how you do UI, other people can do those better. And so we can definitely hire better people to do all of those jobs. And so we need to get very clear about what are the points of how we teach that are really non-negotiable, deeply held, important company perspectives, and what things are just like, well, that's a nice idea. And so that's been a big kind of change that I've had to go through internally, just and still have to go through. I say it like it's in the past. Yeah, definitely still actively working with all that. And the one other thing that we've done there, so for a long time, Ed was CEO, I was COO, and we kind of split those roles between us. Split the CEO role between the two of us. What we've done recently then to hire in a kind of professional COO with a depth of experience in building companies and scaling companies. And he's just been absolutely brilliant at pointing out the time when it's like, well, that sounds like an individual contributor opinion, Ben. Let's roll that one back in. And just drawing that line and helping to get us good at spotting those patterns and giving the team the clear direction but enough space.
What's that transition like been for you as a founder, moving? I guess you're going through a transition from a founder-led business into a real leadership-led business. So what's that transition like for you?
Actually, it's been an incredibly positive one, and it is oddly feels to me like the bits that I really care about in the business, I have much more impact on than for years. And things like how to plan annual review schedules and so on, and all of these other things that I have been managing, I don't have to spend so much time with. And indeed, even within product, we then got professional product management in, which means that the more I can focus on just saying this is the direction we're going in, the more they can take up the reins and like start pulling the work and really driving it themselves because they know they're pointing in the right direction. And that, there's nothing more gratifying than seeing the direction that you stayed in. Like, we want to go over there, and then see a bunch of people come up with ideas here that are better than any of the ideas that I would have had. And it's like, yeah, that's what I meant, but that's much better than I would have done it. And it's like, okay, this is now gathering speed, and this is gathering excitement, and I think that has been very positive. It's that's basically been very positive. It's a difficult thing to learn, though. Just stepping back and getting the space to not grab onto the details that not only am I used to doing, but I'm confident that the company has been successful because I'm used to, because that is the way we have both been. And so it's
And scaling in the way that you have, and now bringing in a more senior team as well. I suppose funding is one part that makes all of that possible. So talk to me a bit about your experiences with fundraising.
What kind of aspects? I mean, it's a.
So how have you found it? What have the real challenges been? And I suppose most importantly, any advice off the back of that?
So I suppose from the beginning, we were very lucky with our early investors. And I think this came from a couple of decisions. One, at that time, this is 10, 11 years ago, we went out to Techstars in Boston, and we we'd spoken a bit with VCs in London, and at the time, the whole approach was much more founded on launching a product that earns money straight away, yeah, create something that people pay for, whereas our intuition and our ambition was to create something that is changing the whole way that the world learns. And our strong intuition on that was, in order to do that, we need to have a free product fundamentally, because, and we'll be able to monetize that later, it's teaching a language, people pay for this stuff, but we need to have some runway to go do this without selling everything every inch of the way, because that's going to kill our organic growth and kill the level of scale that we can get to. At the time, and I don't know whether that's still the case, but at the time, that kind of message landed much better with US investors than UK investors. I think that's changed, but that was the case. And we got Ed, in fact, like, led this one, that his approach was, we need to find one good lead investor who we get on with and who gets what we're trying to do. I don't care how many investors hate this. And it was, and so at times when I have to say, my intuition was to adapt our pitch to what investors were telling us, and they're saying, no, you need to be talking more like this. And I was like, no, let us not call investors. They don't think in the way that we think. They're not getting on this boat. Which meant that the investors that we did get as our Series A leads, and in the seed round were got Avalon Ventures, who were previously kind of founder investors in Zynga and companies like that, and they, very, very cutting edge, very helpful, open-minded, but also relaxed investors, very much advisory, but they've invested in us to build the company, and they sit back and give us the room to do that. So I guess the advice coming out of that is finding it's very easy to be in a plaintiff mindset when you're starting a company and raising money, and you're like, I need to get these people to like me and give me money. And I think that the shift to, I actually really, really believe in this, and I'm doing something, I've really thought it through, and I really believe in this, I'm doing something awesome. And I just got to go out and find the person who gets that. And it doesn't matter if 1,000 investors don't get it, because I actually only need one to get it. And those are, I think that's the kernel of advice there.
And you mentioned there as well that the seed investors actually reinvested in your Series A as well, which seems to be a massive stamp of approval, if you like. So how?
Right, and they actually upped their pro rata at the Series B as well, which again shows the kind of investor that they are. And I think that has a huge value to it. It's a long-term relationship. These people we've been working with now for 11 years, and we've got more to go. Yeah, they're still are.
Tell me about that relationship then. So that is, I think, so important, is that stakeholder management to ensure that you keep them on board, and hopefully that comes around to repay itself when you go to raise your next round. So how do you manage your stakeholder management?
And we have just always had a very open conversation, but I'm not sure that I can take more credit for that than the investors themselves. And in as much as we can take credit for it, it is by choosing the right investors. And I think which, talking to previous companies they've invested in, seeing how they behave. I mean, I know actually for our Series B, which was led by Octopus, who are also incredibly supportive. And we had a few term sheets on the table, and we chose Octopus after talking to a bunch of their entrepreneurs and getting the feedback quite regularly. Yeah, we had Octopus and these two other tier one VCs. As soon as we had 2 bad quarters in a row, the other VCs stopped picking up the phone, and just, we were clearly off their list of companies that are likely to make a 10x return. So sort of, whereas Octopus were always helpful, supportive, come in and keep giving advice, keep giving support, which is really what you most need from an investor, is someone who's going to be that constant help. And I think the way they talk about it, talking about the company as we, talking about it as their project that they're bought into and excited by, you get those kinds of triggers and indicators that they're in the kind of right mindset.
So what's next then for the business? What are the big goals over the next year or so?
Well, I mean, I guess back to the sort of very highest level of where we're going, which I alluded to earlier on, but just to bring that into focus, the company mission is to enrich people's minds, to enrich their worlds. And what we mean by that is that we're a learning company, but it's not just about learning for the sake of learning or learning to pass exams. Like, what really fascinates us is how learning changes the way you perceive the world, the way you interact with other people, and your ability to live a rich life. And so tech has this incredible power, which is largely unrealized, where experiences online can be hugely engaging. You know, our phones can be unbelievably distracting. I know that I take refuge at times in stress. I kind of look at cryptocurrency price movements as my default if I'm slightly stressed and not quite sure what I should be concentrating on. These kind of things you take refuge in, but that's not very helpful. The power of these devices to draw people's attention in, but then give them learning experiences that then enrich their life when they go back out and change the way they relate to the people in their life, change the kinds of things they can do, where the places they can go, things they can explore. That is what we're really looking for. So it's learning to enrich your world. And within that, how that applies to language learning is that the way that you learn a language ultimately, and in fact the only way that you gain an ability in a foreign language, is by processing target language content that you have to strain a bit to understand. So it is the process of straining to make sense of it that is your brain getting on top of it and learning to understand that content. And that is actually the only necessary and sufficient condition to learning a language. Learning how to translate all the vocab, learning the grammar structures, they might help you to get more content to be just above your current level, but you don't actually need to do it. Children never do that. They still learn. And it is the default way to learn a language is to just try and understand it. Language learning syllabuses and mobile apps are part of that, or EdTech, really focus on the teaching you the rules of the language, like it's an external thing you have to learn. And they leave this bit of immersion to when you go and live in the country afterwards. I was talking to someone yesterday who studied Italian at university, and she said when she arrived in Italy, having done 3 years of Italian, she still couldn't really talk to people. Within 6 months, she was pretty fluent, but that bit was just left until after the course. So what we're doing at Memrise is really creating a virtual immersion company. Like, it's just taking immersive experiences that currently you have to go to Italy to do it, and giving you all of that experience online. In order to do that, teaching people the words and phrases is a useful step towards giving you a larger corpus of content that is interesting to you. Like, if I just try and start showing you films now in German, you might not know anything about it. But if I can teach you a bunch of words and phrases, I can start curating the right content for you. And so we've been moving from our very first product, we're using imagery and so on to relate the pieces of language to you, then stepping up to using videos of native speakers, tens of thousands of those, to show you all the language being used in context, and start getting that immersive experience. And now the next step is to really double down on that and just create fully immersive experiences that link back all the way. And so it's this whole stairway up from the total beginner to what you actually need to walk into a bar in Dusseldorf and order your beer. And so that's the section at the top there that we're focused on now.
And just to finish off then, where can people go to find out more about Memrise?
I mean, going to download the apps on the App Store is really the top thing. The website is where we're going to be actively developing most over the next year or so, or most of the cutting edge developments are going to be on the website. But at the moment, I'd definitely go to the mobile apps. That's the kind of cutting edge product so far.